welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we talk about self-care that goes way beyond bubble baths, chocolate, and wine. And I have nothing against those things. I enjoy chocolate almost every day, but they are Band-Aids. And so they are temporary experiences. And what I like to get into is the self-care that is transformational. It makes permanent changes because you're going where so many people do not have the courage to venture, and that is inside, to where it's murky and unknown and mysterious. And that is why you need a guide, because you just don't know what you don't know. So here I am, your self-care guide, and I love to also get other guides along with me. So today I have Corey Poirier. Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm so happy to be here. I know we've been lining this up for a while, so I'm super excited to make it happen today. So awesome. Really excited.
Yes, very awesome. And we are connecting coast to coast in Canada. Well, not quite my coast, but yeah, you're all the way in PEI, and I'm here in Calgary. So welcome. And I also want to welcome you listeners. We have listeners from all over the world, 30 plus countries. So welcome from wherever you are listening. Corey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so it's funny because there's so many directions I could probably go. I'm one of those people that somebody described me recently as a multi-passionite. And which I think an even cooler name, though, is what she called herself, which was a passionista.
Oh, yes.
But one of those people that has multiple passions and always has. So describing me sometimes is a little bit harder than maybe somebody who's really niche focused in their life. But the short version is I grew up in a small town, raised by a single mother, and I always add that in because it really played, I think, a big part in who I am and who I became. And, so I lived that life of us not knowing if we were going to have a whole lot to eat and going to the boys and girls club, because that way I could access things, like play road hockey and stuff, whereas we didn't have the money for me to get outfitted to play ice hockey. And which is a tough thing in Canada, I think. So from that perspective, I grew up in this small town, was raised by my mother and my grandfather, who kind of acted as my father. And they raised me under this kind of belief of your word is your oath, and say yes to everything. This was a hard one for me to challenge later on in life, but say yes to everything and then figure out how to do it. And then I learned that a lot of the highest of achievers I was trying to learn from and emulate were saying no to everything and only yes to a few things.
Yeah.
So that was a hard conditioning. So that's probably why growing up in a small town, it relates to that as well. Barely graduated high school. In fact, I got a 49+1 by a teacher, which I always say means I technically didn't graduate, but he wanted me to know. He gave me the freebie to allow me to graduate. And so I bring that up because sometimes when people hear you have books out or you're a speaker or what have you, that, oh, you must have just, been amazing in school. I will say not only did I barely graduate, I didn't read my first book until I was 27. And I didn't know the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Embarrassing to say, by 18, and there, like the possessive there. So that tells you my level of where I was at. And to kind of bring this full circle, what happened was about, 1996, I launched a newspaper, started interviewing people for my newspaper. And then basically that migrated into my speaking career. And on the side of the speaking career, I've always had other things on the go, like a radio show, newspaper, all those kind of things. So the speaking has been for 17 years my core business, my bread and butter, and it's been my core passion and purpose, but I've always, as a multi-passionate person, had other things on the go. So that's me in 3 or 4 minutes. That's a tough one, but that's a bit of...
I get it. My husband was just showing me a diagram he did the other day because he's kind of at a crossroads, and he said, no wonder I'm confused. And he had probably, 30 different directions that he could take his next step in. I said, I totally get it. I feel the same way, even though I'm really focused on courageous self-care. I love a lot of different things and doing a lot of different things. And so I get it. So Corey, what I love to do on the show is, first of all, to have guests share your favorite current self-care practice. And the reason why I like to do this is because self-care, even though we're blasted from the media what they think we should buy and do for self-care, it's actually really personal. And I love hearing different people's self-care practices. And I think for our listeners, it gives ideas on what could be self-care practices. And also it's just fun to hear what people do to take care of themselves. So what is your current favorite self-care practice?
So likewise, I have a few, but this is the one I'll hone in on because and we're speaking about books, and the newest book that I'm working on right now, the next book we'll call it, which is finally the book where I'm revealing what I learned from the highest of achievers. A couple of people that have read it, this is the thing that they jumped right out at them and they said, I've never heard of this. And wow. And I got to give credit where it's due. My girlfriend, who's open about this, she battled alcohol addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so where she learned this was in a treatment center. While they were going through treatment, they taught them this practice. And so now she brought it to me and we practice it together. And it's a thing called MEPS. And so essentially what it involves is I'll say, you can be as many people as you want, but the two of us make a time once a week and we do our MEPS. And so what that means is I'll say, hey, Corey, checking in. And then essentially what I do is I share how I'm feeling with those 5 things. So M is for mental, how are you feeling mentally? E is emotionally. So how are you feeling emotionally? P is physically, and that could be, am I working out, getting exercise, doing yoga, meditating, whatever that could be. One of the S's is spiritually, so that obviously could be meditation as well, or just are you grounded or what have you. And then the final S is socially. Are you connecting with people and what have you? And so what we do is it's like an inventory of our past week. And so by doing that, and we also will mention what our success was that week and what we're grateful for. And so what it does is it gets you celebrating the successes you might not share with people. B, it reminds you what you're grateful for and what you have to be grateful for. And C, and perhaps most important, for the things that you're really doing well, it gives you that little pat in the back. But for the things you're not doing well, it gets you to start focusing on how I can do better. But then B, and just as important perhaps, is it also gets it out so that you're not carrying that inside. Like if you feel physically I'm not feeling that great, but if you get to share that with people, I think it's almost like therapy, right? You get it out rather than stuck in. And so that MEPS practice, which we each take a turn, and so I've also sort of brought it to other people. I can even do it on my own if I want, but that practice has been my probably the most crucial self-care thing that I've incorporated in the last couple of years.
I love that. I've never heard it presented that way. It's so succinct and straightforward. And what I think is super important about that, Corey, is that ideally you're doing it with someone else. And that is so important for self-care. Often we think, and this is a big mistake that people make with self-care, because it has the word self in it, we think it all has to be by myself, for myself. And that's just not true. The best self-care I have found and facilitated is in partnership, it's in community. And like you said, when we hold stuff in, we are not serving anyone. But when we can fully express ourselves in a safe environment with supportive people, and you of course have to choose the right people, that is essential self-care. And I love that you identified that as a practice. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
That's so powerful. So I'm curious, do you notice a difference between who you were before you started doing that and who you are now that you have this regular practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I think the only thing I noticed that would be sort of a difference for me is I'm more aware of it, which means that I'm conscious of, I got to make a change in this area, or this is where I'm struggling. Mm-hmm. And so I think it makes me more aware of it. I don't know that it changes sort of how I feel at the root, because I think for me personally, I'm very ambitious. I'm type A personality. I'm very passionate and purpose-filled. And so there's a lot of exercises that I've already done to get me here, so as an example, I actually have practices for how I reduce negative energy and increase positive energy. So that could include an exercise I do to see who I'm surrounding myself with and figure out where I have to make changes. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole bunch of other things I did. I'll call it as a filter or a layer already to get to this point. Yes. And so I think coming into MEPS, even when I discovered it, I was already sort of on the right track and far down that track because I had put so much in, let's say, deposits into the bank already. Yeah. But where I notice it is it makes me more aware of those areas where if I'm just busy, I might not notice that, hey, I haven't been doing yoga. Hey, I haven't been meditating. Like it gets me more aware of it, which I think at the end of the day, once I do them, I feel better. So I guess indirectly, I've noticed that if I get my meditation in, let's say 5 days a week, I feel 100 times better than if I don't. And yet if I don't do the MEPS, it's easy for me to forget.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of an indirect yes, I feel better from it. But it's not the MEPS, I don't think that makes me feel better. It's what the MEPS does for me.
Exactly. Yeah. For most of my life, I've been super resistant to tracking anything. And in the last year, I've started tracking and being more aware. And like you're saying, awareness is such a key to be able to make progress, to sustain happiness. It really, like, if you don't have awareness, you can't go anywhere. You can't get any better. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
I'll add in too, I use a thing for people that are looking for maybe a tool as well, outside of what, I shared for an exercise. I also use Brendan Burchard's peak performance planner. I think I have it right here.
Yes.
The high performance planner. So I use that every day. And I know we're audio here, but if you're familiar with it, this is my—
I have one too. Yep.
I got my newest 3-pack in the mail. I haven't even cracked it open yet, but I'm using the main one right now. And so I use that for tracking, to your point about tracking, but I also use a thing by Darren Hardy, who is a lot of people would know him as the publisher of Success Magazine, and he wrote 2 books. One of them is called The Compound Effect, and he shared this thing that he does called a weekly rhythm register. And the idea is, if you do small things every day, you'll be blown away by who you become when they compound. And so it's a thing that basically every day, and you can Google weekly rhythm register, Darren Hardy, and you'll find, if you look hard enough, it'll only take you probably 10 minutes, you'll find one you can print as a PDF with his name on it, licensed or whatever. And the thing is that what it does is it allows you every day to track what you're doing. And so you can put, I think, as many as 10 goals for your daily goals. And so what I do is I might put, let's say, if I wanted to spend 5 hours learning in a week, then I would say that's my goal for the week. And then every day I keep track of how many hours I put in. So how I use that is if I'm at 80% for the week of all 10 of those, then I'm crushing it. So I know I'm never going to get to 100%. That would be an amazing week. But even if I'm at 80%, I'm crushing it. But to your point, I never used to track stuff. And I can see from the difference between when I started tracking it, a year later, I was crushing goals in months that used to take me years. And that's no joke. And it's not because I've changed it all. It's because now I'm conscious of it and tracking it. So I'm like you hear my personality. I'm all over the place. For me to track something is a challenge and a nightmare. But I've learned, as much as I don't want to do it, that's probably why I need to.
Yes.
That's an important self-care for me.
Thanks for those great resources too.
Okay, we're going to take a short pause for a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
So the other thing I love to get guests on the show to do is share a story of courage. And before you do that, the reason I like to do that is because courage, we can't really make any progress in our lives without moving through fear. There is fear around all the things that are important for us to grow as people. And when we get to hear other people's stories of courage, number one, it gives us a frame of reference, like, oh, if that person did it, then I could probably do that too. And it also gives us ideas. Oh, I never thought of moving through a situation like that, like this guest explained. So now that I have that awareness, I can move forward on that. So courage is a collective experience. It's an energy that we can draw more and more into us. And so I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story of courage, Corey.
So this is, I've shared this story in the past in a different context, meaning I've shared it as, I even have used it many times during openings of my talks because of the story itself. It works on so many levels as a speaker, but I don't share it often from the perspective of looking deep into the courage involved in the story. And so the story goes like this, and it might seem light on the front end, but if you look deeper, again, you see the deepness of it. But basically, I had a stage play in a Fringe Festival, 2002. Was terrified of public speaking, which is ironic given what I do for a living, and terrified of being on the stage. One of the actors sprained his ankle. I had to write myself a part. I actually wrote a part where I could come out with my back to the audience. That's how terrified I was. And I never faced the audience. But at the end of the run, I said to one of the actors, I got to get over this fear if I'm going to stay in the performance and entertainment industry. And he said, I don't know if you heard about it, but there's a local stand-up comedy workshop at the university. And so I said, well, I can go to a workshop. Doesn't mean I'm ever going to have to get on stage. So I said, why not? So I went to this workshop for 2 weeks, learned, basically all we learned was here's how you adjust the mic stand. And that was pretty much most of the training. And number one fear in the world above death has been proven is public speaking.
Right.
Stand-up comedy is even a bigger fear. It's just that it's so few people ever try it. They don't even register it as a number. And yet here we're going to learn about it. And all we've been taught is here's how you adjust the mic stand. So we go to a comedy club the third week, and we were told we were going to watch people entertain us. But we found out, you probably see where this is going, 5 minutes to showtime, that we were the entertainers.
Oh my gosh.
So and here comes where courage comes into play, because I had a decision to make. And I've jokingly said, but there was some truth to it, that I went into the bathroom to try to find an exit window so I could shimmy down the side of the building, but not tell people or show people I was actually leaving. But when I came back out, there were 15 of us that showed up at that workshop and had paid and went to the workshop. Only 7 were left whenever I came out of the bathroom 5 minutes later. 8 had walked out the front door, like almost like a mutiny. They literally all walked out. And so the courage aspect of it is, do I stay or do I go? And I don't know fully if I recognized yet, but what I know now, looking back, is the decision to perform was going to be a game changer for me, because it was going to be that moment where I decided, was I going to be that guy in the bar 30 years later watching a comic saying, oh, I was going to be me one day, or was I going to be the person that pushed through it and basically got a chance to try something that I knew I would enjoy. And so I pushed through it. And here's the part of the story that, people love to hear with these stories, that where, all of a sudden I crushed it. I was the glory of the night. But what happened was I didn't know to turn the mic on.
Oh, no.
I told folks, bombed horribly, no laughter, sweat coming down my face. The worst you could imagine. Then the guy calls me over that got me into it, hit me in the back of the head and told me that the mic wasn't turned on, which is why I thought I wasn't getting laughter. Then we turned the mic on. I told the same 2 jokes again, and they bombed again with the mic. So that was my first night ever in stand-up comedy. But it seemed, so this is why I say it was light, because it seemed like, oh, well, just another night, and be like somebody getting up for an open mic show to play music and being nervous. It seems like that, but I didn't realize until then that what it did was it expanded my comfort zone so massively that it was responsible for everything that followed after, meaning me actually getting on a stage and speaking. That was part of what happened for that night. Jumping out of a plane years later, even though I'm scared of heights, that was what triggered it. Get surfing, even though I can't swim. Like all those things. And you might say, well, is that just because you did something that most people say is the biggest fear in the world? It wasn't that. What it was is I look at it now, like I took the courage to get on the stage, and because I didn't die on the stage, which is what I think somehow we think is going to happen, because that didn't happen, I knew then that all these things that I told myself over the years I couldn't do, that I truly could do. And so it might, comedy is what it might be when I'm sharing the story for me, but for somebody else, it could be going on a sales call and sitting in front of a CEO of a big company and just having the courage to talk to that person, or it could be asking somebody out on a date. Whatever that is, I think once you have the courage and you try it and you live and you survive it, it changes your view of it. So that's the story, but that's what I think now looking back came out of it, is it changed everything in terms of my viewpoint of what was possible in our lives.
I love that. It's such a powerful story. And I call those things little big things. Like on the surface, they seem like, oh yeah, like just another night I did this, but it turned out okay. I didn't die. But underneath what's going on is that it's a huge thing. It's a symbol of what's to come, what you have already overcome. It's just a gigantic deal. And so I love that you shared that and how it opened up your comfort zone. And that's what it's really all about, is expanding that comfort zone, doing things where we think we're going to die or something even worse is going to happen. And then none of what we imagined comes true. And then we have the capacity to expand ourselves even more.
Awesome. Well, and I'll add in too, one thing, if people are looking for maybe the strategy that I learned years later that took place that night, and then also that when I started studying high achievers, I realized they were all doing, because most of the people that I interview, we see them now as these celebrity CEOs and that, but when I talk to them about their backstory, most of them were terrified of speaking, grew up in a rough home. Like it's not this glamorous start that we all think happens. Right. And so because of that, they're used to stepping outside their comfort zone. And so I studied, what are they doing and what did I do? And so, Christina, a little, I guess, resource, if people want to learn more about how I did it, I actually reveal it completely, what I learned from that, in my TEDx talk called Crushing Your Fears and Expanding Your Comfort Zone. So if people Google that, my name and that TEDx talk, then it's like 14 minutes, I think, of me sharing, here's the 3 steps that I discovered everybody does to have that courage to step outside their comfort zone.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
Corey, I'm sure that people are intrigued and they want to know more, and you have this vast amount of wisdom and information to share. So where can they connect with you online?
So really good question. And I think I'll give people 2 spots. One is I'll call it the hub. So if somebody just wants to reach out, say hi, has questions, what have you, the hub would be thatspeakerguy.com. So it's real easy, thatspeakerguy.com. And on there, it has my TEDx talks, articles, places where you can reach out to me. It has our shows, stuff like that as well. So we have a show called Let's Do Influencing, so people can hear our interviews there as well. So that's all in the main hub. And then I'd like to give people a gift. And so I mentioned that I speak regularly. Well, I also coach and teach speakers. We have a couple of programs in that regard. One of the things in the back end of our program is we have interviews with experts. So what I'd like to do is give people access to one of those interviews. Awesome. And so where you can go, so this is the second place to connect with me, is thespeakingprogram.com. You see, I like easy.coms.
Yes.
Thespeakingprogram.com. And if you go there, what you'll get access to is a video interview by Tom Ziglar. And so for people who may not know that name, you may have heard his father's name, Zig Ziglar, considered one of the best presenters of all time. So Tom not only traveled on the road learning from his father, they've had people in their offices like Seth Godin, Dave Ramsey. And so Tom has sat with them, talked with them, interviewed them, and watch them. And basically this interview is him revealing for, I think it's 40 minutes or whatever it works out to, him revealing all of what he learned about crushing it as a speaker.
Wow.
So that's a free gift. It's a YouTube video, so it's easy watch.
Thank you so much, Corey. I love your energy, and I deeply appreciate you taking time to share so many resources and gifts with the listeners and with me. Thank you so much for being here.
It was my 100% pleasure. And thank you as well, I'll add in, for doing what you're doing. I think sometimes as the host, we're kind of the curator, but people don't realize all that goes into this. So thank you as well for bringing this alive on a regular basis for people to learn from and grow from and actually find self-worth, and at the same time find that courage that they need.
I appreciate your gratitude. I'm letting it in. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If this was useful for you, please give it a like, thumbs up, whatever platform you're listening to it on. Maybe leave a comment. We love that. Share it with a friend. Become a subscriber. That way you'll be able to keep up with all of the latest self-care strategies and interviews. So yes, thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Thanks again, Corey, for being here.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to talking with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.